Welcome to the Abide Project update. I am Reverend Tyler Wagenmaker.
And I am the Reverend Cedric Parsels. Well, Tyler, we're back.
We are back. It's been a while, actually.
It has been a while since we've been together. Where are we exactly?
You know, maybe the better question to ask is, where are we not, Cedric? Where are we not? Because I mentioned that because tonight, November 30, 2023, is the night when Classis Grand Rapids East was going to be having an informational meeting. And, well, we showed up there, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
We got
there early.
We did. We get there early to get a good seat. They always have seats for visitors. They had seats set out again for visitors.
It seemed that they had visitors this evening.
They did have some visitors there. Yeah. We tried to be a visitor. But what happened?
Well, I was washing my hands at the time, and I walked in a little bit later.
You were. So, I'll tell you what happened.
Thank you.
Yes,
I was. Explain to me why I'm not there and I'm here instead.
That's right. We are there. There's no time travel involved. We are here and not there because we were told that we were not welcome, and in fact, we had to leave. Specifically told, you have to leave, and. By some members of the steering team and also by individuals there at Classis Grand Rapids East. So we are not there, which again struck me actually because Classis meetings historically, I mean, I've been to Classis meetings for over 23, 24 years plus. Classis meetings are always open meetings unless they go into executive session because of disciplinary, very sensitive disciplinary matters. This was just an information meeting tonight.
Right.
And yet, right from the get-go, we were told, even before they had gavelled, that their internal communications were, this is an executive session. And so you are not an office bearer in Classis Grand Rapids East. And so you are not welcome. And with those words, and you have to leave. With those words, specifically. So, which is the second time actually it's happened. Last time, I was at a Classis Grand Rapids East meeting with a few others, and they went into Classis or executive session. Not immediately. They had regular decorum, and eventually they declared executive session on something that again wasn't a discipline matter, but a sensitive discipline matter. But again, kind of two meetings in a row. This one, they didn't even let us sit in for the opening prayer or singing or anything. It was go.
Yeah. Which is sort of, I think we were talking about how symbolic this is.
Yeah.
About sort of the state of the Christian Reformed Church. About how, there's division and there's distrust. There's been a breaking of trust. I think we would say that the breaking of that trust began with some churches in Classis Grand Rapids East, and it's unfortunate, in a context like this where there is such a lack of trust. When you want to build trust, continuing to try to do things behind closed doors. I remember at Synod 22 that there was a lot of anxiety and angst about having the synodical discussion behind closed doors without, people sitting in the gallery. And it just seems like, and the reason for that was we want this to be a transparent kind of thing. And it seems that, the continuing to have these executive sessions seems to continue to lack that transparency that I think is needed in order, if the denomination is going to trust to the wisdom of Classis Grand Rapids East and other classes that are in a similar situation, there needs to be more transparency, I think. And this was an informational meeting.
Yes, this wasn't public information.
Right, it was supposed to be for public information within the classes.
Well, and I think it's again symptomatic. My feelings are not hurt by it. Your feelings weren't hurt by it. It frees up our evening in many ways, actually. So, and it gave us time to just talk and kind of think through this even more as well. But I think it's symptomatic of what's what's happening in the denomination, and we've said we've covenanted together. And covenanting happens not just within even a classes. It happens denominational wide. We're both office bearers, both ordained ministers. We've signed the form of subscription to the covenant of office bearers. We're in good standing. There's no reason to keep office bearers in good standing out of a public meeting, and except unless there is a breaking of covenant, it feels like, that's been taking place. And I think that is symptomatic that, in many ways, what's been happening in Classis Grand Rapids East, and maybe a couple other, some churches in Classis Grand Rapids East, is that there's been on their own a type of, we're just going to do it our way. And for the rest of the churches, how it impacts you or not, almost, I don't know, sometimes it feels like they don't care, or maybe they do, but it comes across as if they don't care, and as if we're just going to do it our way. And in fact, you're not even welcome to listen in. We're not asking to even speak. We just wanted to listen.
To hear what's going on in their churches and what's going on in their classes, and to understand, trying to understand what's going on. And I think it's we talked about the being symptomatic or symbolic, you might say. I mean, I think part of the reason why the Christian Reformed Church is in the situation it's in right now is because there were some churches that believed that they could simply act on their own and it wouldn't have any effect, right, on the rest of the denomination, or shouldn't have any effect on the denomination. And in fact, the matter is that we're all connected. What you're doing in class, what happens in Classis Grand Rapids East doesn't just affect Classis Grand Rapids East.
Right.
It affects the entire denomination. And we have an interest in the well-being and the health of Classis Grand Rapids East. And the fact that they continue to act as if we shouldn't be interested, or we shouldn't be involved or hearing or listening to what's going on, or know what they're doing, almost gives the impression that as you said, it gives the impression that maybe they're, maybe they don't, I don't know.
Our mind goes places.
Yeah.
Yes. Yours probably goes places as well. So, but they were supposed to report on they had a committee for Classis Grand Rapids East, the next steps committee, and that was the report this evening. It was made up of the steering committee, 8 people on the steering committee, some more familiar names: Dwayne Kelderman, vice president, Kathy Smith, I should say Dwayne Kelderman, vice president of Calvin Seminary at one time, no longer, he's retired. Kathy Smith, who has served as parliamentarian for a number of years at Synod, and is a professor at Calvin Seminary. She is on that 8-member making up that steering team of this report. Mike Abma, I believe he's the clerk, I believe perhaps of Classis Grand Rapids East.
He was a delegate to Synod.
He was a delegate of Synod this past go around. And so they convened a listening circle, essentially, of the churches of Classis Grand Rapids East, different representatives back in October, the end of October.
But it wasn't just so they had they got representatives from every church, it sounds like, together to talk about what was going on and how they were responding to Synod 23. But it's not just Classis Grand Rapids East people that are involved in this conversation or this listening circle.
That's true.
They reached out. This is a binational thing that they've done. In fact, they say
through a Zoom.
They recruited partners from beyond their classes, from other classes, to participate with them in this listening circle.
Which just makes it ironic again, because we are outside of Classis Grand Rapids East, and we were told tonight, you are not welcome. I thought we were better together on some of the stuff, Cedric, but certain voices from the outside are allowed in, but I guess we weren't even looking for a voice. We were just looking to listen. So, but again, I think, that's symptomatic that things are going on in the denomination that we need to just own and name, and to pretend that we are better together, that things can go on. I think tonight, for instance, just demonstrates, is just a small example that doesn't work in the practicality of it in terms of doing ministry together, because there has to be a level of trust of that covenanting together.
Right.
So even when there are conversations that sometimes classes want to have, So they came up with some recommendations that after the listening circle was done. Some of the listening circle of the churches, they brought out some concerns. First of all, there were laments. There was loss. The churches of Classis Grand Rapids East are a number of the churches, not all of them, but are feeling some of this loss from and lamenting of what has happened the past couple of synods, where all the churches have, the representations of all the churches have gathered together and have said this is where we stand on issues of human sexuality. Classis Grand Rapids East, with their delegates and where they've consistently come down, they've come down on the other side of where synod has come down, and so they're lamenting that the loss.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that Classis Grand Rapids East, and maybe a few other pockets in the denomination. I think it's fair to say, and we have to understand and empathize to a certain degree. I really do think that synod, what has happened, has come as a real shock.
Why do you say that, Cedric?
Well, I think that, given the proximity of the denominational offices in Grand Rapids to Classis Grand Rapids East, I think the number of institutions associated that are central to the Christian Reformed Church, like Calvin Seminary or Calvin College / University, being located practically in Classis Grand Rapids East, I think that there was a sense that they, in a sense, represented the denomination, that their mindset, that their approach to what it meant to be CRC was more widely held than in fact it was. And what I think Synod 22 sort of showed is that actually they're in a minority when it comes to what it means, what is the Christian Reformed Church, and what is our mission, and what should we be doing. And I think that realizing that you're part of a denomination that really doesn't reflect your values and reflects, where you're at, I can understand. I think we need to, that came as a shock, I think.
You have the stages of grief, five stages of grief. Different churches and individuals in the classes are at different places of that expression of grief. I mean, even one of the listening circles, they came out with, these are some of the things we came back with. One was a hope. They said a hope for a reversal of CRC policy, or at least space to disagree. They said even creative non-compliance.
Right.
That doesn't engender a whole lot of ability to always trust than with the Church of Classis Grand Rapids East, where they're saying maybe we should be creatively, almost kind of sneakily, almost looking at we're not going to comply with where the denomination has said this is where we've always stood and this is where we stand.
That was unhelpful. And in fact, part of one of the things that is in this packet of information, the information that they're going over in the classes meeting, by the way, is public information. So it wasn't like it was a great secret what they were going to talk about. But they, part of that packet included sort of a flow chart. And we're going to do our best to try to make this whole packet available for the churches in general. But the flow chart included even a little bubble about, what are some different, different decisions that could be made. And one of the decisions or strategy that was proposed, or at least floated out there, was, well, maybe some churches will simply ignore synod and they'll do what they'll do and try to stay underneath the radar. And, and again, as we said, that we're working in a low trust environment in the denomination. Classis Grand Rapids East and some other churches have broken the covenant with us. And so we're in this situation, and it sounds like they're not completely willing to deal with that.
Well, Synod 2023 gave the instruction to all the classes to bring their churches into compliance. Again, in different ways. And they even addressed that in this report. One of the things they mentioned was that the conflict has to be addressed. They said Synod 2023 instructed classes to guide into compliance office bearers who publicly disagree with Synod 2022's confessional declaration. And there have been a number in Classis Grand Rapids East, maybe even a majority, it sounds like, who have disagreed. But then they say this conflict cannot be ignored indefinitely, and on some level I read that and I think it's almost they're admitting to ignoring it presently, that they're just hoping above hope that 2024 does something and we're going to ignore even 2024, which I think very graciously said we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt that they're going to do what it means to be in covenant with each other. And I think this continues to demonstrate that we've given them the benefit of the doubt as the churches in the Christian Reformed Church, and there are some that are just continuing to say, almost you shouldn't have done that because we're going to take it and we're going to run with it. We're not going to do what we have been tasked to do by Synod.
Right.
We're going to, in many ways, we're going to ignore Synod. We're not going to take each other into compliance.
Right.
And that's sad that happens. Because it is out of step with the denomination.
Right.
And,
well, it's basically choosing. It's at that point, in principle, you've chosen to be your own denomination.
Yes,
at that point.
That's a good way to put it. That's true. They had some other things in anticipating the impact of Synod 2024. One of their from the steering committee, as they've kind of reflected, and this all is now coming from their steering committee, their recommendations is they said, first, any decision by Synod 2024 to restrict the gravamen process would be a tipping point for many Classis GRE congregations. Even that language, restricting the gravamen process.
I know, you're trying to, you're goading.
I'm goading you.
You're goading me.
Goading you, Cedric. Yes.
This is I know, I have to comment on the way that this is being framed, and I think it's fair to say that I do think it's fair to say that there's a certain amount of gaslighting that's going on in the denomination. This is what Synod 23 and potentially what Synod 24 could do is not restrict gravamen, or gravamina is the plural if you want to go that direction, is to clarify what the process has always been. There has never been an official process in the Christian Reformed Church or in our church order for allowing people to take exception to our confessions. I remember I had a conversation with Cornelius Venema, who's the president of Mid-America Seminary, and he was in the Christian Reformed Church in the late 70s, and we were talking about this. He remembers that conversation about when they came out with this gravamina process. And he said, if the conservatives in 1976 had thought that the gravamina process was a way for people to take exception to the confessions, it would have been a non-starter. This is just, it's because,
and he's saying as a denomination, they're all on the same page.
Right.
They're all on the same understanding that you don't take exceptions.
Right. That was the common understanding of what was going on. So this is simply revisionist history.
It's gaslighting.
It's gaslighting.
It's gaslighting.
So whenever I see that word restricting, it gets at me a little bit. But the point is that they do see Synod 24 as a tipping point, especially when it comes to the issue of gravamina.
And again, not in a favorable way, their approach towards Synod. It's they haven't liked what Synod 2022, 2023, the churches have done, and part of their language, even from the committee, the steering committee, is this posture of inflexibility and top-down enforcement on theological issues. Yeah. That's how they're approaching this top-down enforcement. And I think Synod is not a top-down. Synod is the broadest of assembly.
Yeah. In principle, it can't be top-down.
Right. We don't have a pope that says something on high. These are the churches. These are the churches throughout the United States and Canada who've gathered together, and we've had the discussion. I know a lot of times they say, well, Synod wasn't deliberative. Cedric, we've been deliberating on this issue as a denomination in our council rooms, in our classes, and many different synods for decades now. Yeah. So to think that somehow delegates will arrive as if they've never thought about this and a tabula rasa and I'm open to anything is not even realistic with human nature. And it's not even true about our history as a denomination, that we have been deliberating about these issues and talking about it, conversation and listening to voices and studying scripture for decades now, Cedric. And so this top-down approach is not realistic. It's not the reality we've been living in, and there's a week to do the business of Synod. We used to have 2 weeks, and widespread is there's a week, and it always used to be fine. Yeah. We always used to been able to say, nope, that was the decision of Synod, but suddenly when it goes against you, now it's, we're not deliberative anymore. I don't even know what that means, what they're meaning by that, because it isn't meaning what they used to mean, but you could always get done in a week. But now suddenly that week is no longer deliberative.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's fair also to say that synod is how do we put this? Synod is a well-crafted experience. Right? An agenda is set. Various message. There's a lot of messaging that takes place. There's a lot of attempts during synod on the part of the denominational offices and other groups to try to influence the direction of the way it goes.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And
anyone who's been to synod, especially a couple of times, knows that. Is familiar. That's just how. And both of us have been to synod as delegates a number of times.
And but your point about and I've heard also some concern about lumping together bunches of overtures. Well, that's been going on for decades. And but your point is now all of a sudden it becomes a problem. The truth is, the synod doesn't have enough time to address each.
I mean, we could be like the Synod of Dort, and it lasted months and months and months, and the government paid for it. I don't think the government's going to pay for delegates to do that and put us up and house us, and I think people have jobs and families they have to attend to. So as a body, we've said we have a week.
Yep.
Let's work with a week. So they also talked about information about trying to get that out for those who desire to leave the CRC. So they're actively thinking about, there are some churches that are looking to do that.
But it doesn't seem that anyone is really going to move until Synod 24.
Correct. And they say that too.
Yeah, they're waiting to see what happens in Synod 24.
Yes. They still want to have an inspired vision for the Classis Grand Rapids East. And they put that out, a vision where there's mutual encouragement, support, and accountability. But then I read that, and Synod has said there needs to be accountability, but then I ask, what level of accountability is really acceptable?
Right. When they use the word accountability, what do they mean by that? What would it look like for them to hold each other accountable?
It's almost like a UCC kind of a thing, almost, that some of the churches in the classes are wishing that we were more of a United Church of Christ, where it's very congregationalistic, and we get together and we talk, but that's about it, and we're still going to go do our own thing. And maybe that's even a good home for some of the churches to go to. That is an option too, where they can flourish in their ministry as they understand flourishing, as they understand what they want to do, their ministry, what they want to do. So and then so they were going to talk about that. And we weren't there to listen in on that conversation. We had our own conversation about this. So
although I'm sure our conversation would be richer and more nuanced.
It would be
if we had
a chance to listen in.
Yeah.
And for the second time, again, we were not allowed really to listen in. So,
but I mean, shifting gears a little bit here. I mean, even while Classis Grand Rapids East obviously is lamenting and experiencing a great deal of loss and uncertainty and confusion, I still think there's a lot for us to be hopeful about.
Very hopeful,
and
Cedric.
Positive about for the future. I think it's fair. I think we need to sort of take a step back and say, and remember, Synod 22 and now Synod 23 has reaffirmed the confessional biblical position on marriage and human sexuality. So that's a huge. There were a lot of people who were looking at the Christian Reformed Church, including, I think, to a certain extent, Classis Grand Rapids East and other pockets in the denomination, who thought that it wouldn't do that.
Right.
That we couldn't take that kind of a stand. And the fact of the matter is, the Christian Reformed Church did take that stand. And
that's why I think I'm very hopeful about the future, because it makes the Christian Reformed Church increasingly attractive and appealing to growing groups in the United States and Canada and other places where the church is growing, where there are church plants, and they want to be part of a denomination that is really strongly committed to confessions, that is strongly committed to the authority of God's word, and enthusiastic about the gospel preaching, that there is forgiveness from sins through Jesus Christ, there's newness of life, and we've positioned ourselves as a denomination to strongly move in that direction.
Yes, and I think we've seen, we talk about position about people joining the Christian Reformed Church. I think it's important to point out how many, in our context, ethnic minority churches and whole classes have joined our Christian Reformed Church because they look at us and they say, yes, there is a church that is a confessional, faithful, Reformed church.
Yes.
Right? We want to be a part of that. And so we're actually starting, we're starting to look, more, and the less Dutch we become, the more confessional we become.
which is wonderful, which is a delight on that too. And I think that's where I'm hopeful about the future. And I know, a classes like Classis Grand Rapids East is dealing through the stages of grief through that. And because we live close by, we get a front row seat sometimes of that. And so we get to share some of that with the broader denomination. But still knowing that broadly in the denomination, there's a lot of good ministry that is happening, and with a hopefulness that it will increase with a fervency of the gospel and of lives that continue to be changed.
Yep.
So with that, I'm guessing we'll probably do another update eventually for something.
I'm sure.
I'm sure. It's the Christmas season. Right now,
yes,
and it is merry and bright in many ways, and especially we have that hopefulness because Jesus Christ has come, and He has come to save us, to deliver us, and to give us a wonderful eternity that He has won for us. That is in store for all God's people. And so, with that, Merry Christmas,
Merry Christmas, Tyler.
Go ahead.